We're expecting him to be joining us in the next week or so. He's still recovering from his knee replacement. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. And we have Rich Horan that's going to be with us today, and I'll share a little bit of information about him. But as all of you know, the COO Executives in Transition is an initiative that we started here at the COO Forum back in September 2020. And we have our online platform where we have all these recordings hosted. So anybody that is new today, every weekly session going back to September is hosted on the eForum, and a lot of them are worth going back to. It's open to any COO executive or transitioning executive or second in command or anybody who's in operations. And it aligns with everything we do at the COO Forum. We are in our third quarter and we're going to go into summer, continuing with our sessions. And we had some great news last week. Jay Mitchell, who many of you know, just landed a job recently. So if you haven't seen that, if you haven't seen on LinkedIn, go find him and send him some congrats, because that was great news to hear from him. He started with us back in September. So that goes along to anybody here. As you land into something, whether it's a COO role again or not, make sure to let us know, because it's a big network through here. We'd like to share in that celebration with you. And then reach out to us too. If you do land in the COO role operations, reach out to us, because we'd love to have you at our COO Forum meetings. I think you all know our business rules that we run by here. We try to mute, but if Rich opens it up and wants open discussion, feel free to come off mute. We're always business first, so if you need to step away, no problem. Business language, we record our meetings, keep your job prospects confidential, and then post any questions in the chat if you wish. And as I mentioned, Rich may open it up later as well. So as you know, also, Fiona is the go-to if there's anything that you need with regard to this program at all. If you missed a meeting notice or don't have access to the Mighty Network, just reach out to her and she'll take care of you. And with that, I'm going to stop my share because I want to give some background on Rich. Rich Horan is a friend of the COO Forum. We've known him for a long time. Before Rich was a chapter director in Sacramento, he actually was a member and participated in San Francisco meetings and many of our other meetings, actually. And he is a former Air Force colonel. He provides extensive leadership and operations expertise gained from over 27 years in a variety of global management roles. As a Desert Storm veteran, he has over 3,000 hours of F4 and F-15E flight time. Everybody always asks about his helmet in the background. You're welcome to ask about that. His assignments include Air Force headquarters in the Pentagon and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He is currently in his encore career, and he has a portfolio of professional activities, including, as I mentioned, he's the director of our Sacramento chapter of the COO Forum. He's an angel investor, mentor, and coached entrepreneurs. He's an independent board member with service on private and not-for-profit boards. He's the National Association of Corporate Directors, board certified and board fellow. And he's also a member of the Yolo County Financial Oversight Committee. He has an executive MBA from Washington University at St. Louis, a Master's of Science Administration from Central Michigan, and a Bachelor of Arts in Illustrated Photography from the Brooks Institute. And I am going to turn it over to Rich and let him take over this meeting and share with you.
Oh, good morning to everybody. It always sounds better when you listen to somebody else say it than it is when you lived it. But anyway, so it's exciting. So welcome to everybody. Hopefully, well, actually, so for the first thing is everything is open to questions and comments. Please jump in. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about philosophy. I almost made a program out of this when Laura and I were talking, and that is that I think transition is a team exercise, right? It is best done as a team sport than it is done as a single. And a lot of that philosophy for me was cemented at my time at Washington University, St. Louis. That program, when I went through it, was ranked #1 in the world by Wall Street Journal, and it was mainly due to their executive coaching and the executive coaching philosophy, it's about teaming and about giving, so that the more you can give in transition, the more you help others, the better you will actually do and benefit. So I think, and that's going to be kind of an emphasis of today's program, is that I am looking for giving. I'm not looking for me to sit here and give you a monologue on what I've seen or heard or experienced. It's really about collectively as a group, what have we learned and experienced that we can help each other with? So that's kind of, where we're sitting. Uh, Unfortunately, and I not really look at the numbers, but there's probably a majority of people on calls where the sort of groups usually are in transition. It's a little more short term, a little less feeling of control, not quite as confident as you'd want to be. Though companies are, because you don't feel in control, companies are looking for that quiet confidence. So it makes it a little more difficult. And then there are a handful of people on this call who are looking to the future. They understand that they very well could be someone in transition. And so looking for long-term network building, how to re-energize my network, and maybe just understand where the hidden job market is, because maybe I'm looking for a future opportunity. So that's kind of the philosophy of where we're at. So excuse me for a second. I just want to make sure. Actually, I did write notes. If I go free flowing, then who knows what tangent I'll go off on. But anyway, so as this group, I'm really hoping that you guys are able to utilize each other, connect, um, collaborate, and support each other. And then also, when you talk about teaming, I'll also throw out that hopefully it's your family and friends, right? When I went through my Air Force transition, as you might imagine, and I'm sure there are some very long tenured people on this call. You work for a company for 10, 15, 20 years. In my case, 27 years with the Air Force. When I hung up my uniform, a piece of me and my personality was hung up on and put in the closet, right? And there's almost like a mourning of, well, who am I? What do I do? What am I going to do next? What's my next company? And if some of you are like me during that time frame, you didn't spend as much time nurturing and keeping fertile that network you had outside of this assignment or this company. And so I will throw that out. Look to rebuild your network. And once you do, constantly feed it. I was sitting in an airport while I was still with the NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, in uniform, waiting for a flight. So it was about 5 o'clock on a Friday, having a burger and a beer, watching a sports game. And this guy next to me says, "Sounds good. Hey, Colonel, how's it going?" And so we started chatting. Turns out he was a former Navy nuclear engineer, worked in subs. He was now a plant manager for Merck. And so we got talking. He said, "You're probably going to be in transition soon." And we just talked about career change. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me was he spends 1 to 2 hours every Friday on the phone, on email, reaching out to his network. He says he religiously does that. And so I will throw that out for you. If you have not done that in the past, it doesn't have to be Friday, whatever, but take the time to nurture your work. But anyways, so you guys have had a whole host of programs that have gone through, okay, we're in transition, we're writing our resumes, our marketing. Well, I'm going to change this topic a little bit about all that hard work has become success. You now have an interview. And this is where I really want to be interactive let's talk about, we get an interview, we get the offer, and then we start the new job. Right. So, and so let's just talk about that process, because we often don't do it. And then all of a sudden, now here we are. So the first thing that I'd like to throw out is, what level of research do you do? And so this I'm going to throw out to the group of, as you look at this, we say research the company. So I do a simple Google search. I find out more about the company. Hopefully I've done that as I've targeted this group. So I'd like to see, do we have some thoughts on what are the things, other places or other things that you do research that people might throw out, so that we can sort of just get some ideas. This is part of the teaming to help each other out. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. So when I'm researching a company, whether it be, to employ or even to do business with, I spend quite a bit of time poking around at their staff on LinkedIn. I'm more curious about the people that are there, more so than what they throw out on Google or what they have on their website. I want to see the activity that their employees are doing. I want to see if their company is doing anything to support their employees, or hosting events or lifting their employees up or celebrating their employees. So to me, a lot of the real nuts and bolts of what a company is, you can really dig into, and it's so easy to find it on LinkedIn, and then just go to their activity and see what's shaking, see what people are up to. You could pick up on attitudes relatively quickly just by the types of content that is being listed. There's a ton of content that's on LinkedIn about leadership, and you can go and find people at specific companies and scroll through their activity. And if they are continually liking something or continually sharing something about poor leadership, or I wish my leader did this, that might make you scratch your head a little bit to, boy, maybe this is something I need to take into an interview as a question. Hey, you've got employees that are sharing a ton of stuff on social media about leadership. Why do you think that is? So I think there's a lot to be learned from digging into the people side.
Right. No, that's excellent comment versus people are highlighting great leadership. Anybody else have something that they specifically like to do? How about customers? Is it anybody spend any time, or have they done any research with customers? Talk about how they look at the company, how they view them. No, that is definitely a place to go. Some people use Glassdoor. I saw a note on the chat that I got to pop it up because it disappeared on me. Yep, we have a Glassdoor user who likes to use that. The one thing I'll say is, Glassdoor in itself is interesting because people will say, well, they're disgruntled employees. You have to take what they say with a grain of salt. But I will say, as a board member, we actually often take those seriously, because often the problems get filtered out by management. And so as a board member, you will look to see, is that a grassroots look at how a company is doing? Anybody look at financial analysis? So it's a public company. Anybody go to Schwab or Fidelity or whoever you have your investments with, and actually look and see what the analysts are saying about the company and the market that company happens to be in. Or if they're not a public company, you can still look up the industry and get some feedback on how that industry is doing. Is it a place that I want to be? Is a place to go. Any other places that people look, or you just kind of just walk in? I did my Google search. I looked at your website, and now I'm ready to go in. Liz, right now. All right.
Rich, one place I've looked is also inside of trade associations, to look at how active this company may be in the industry. Are they putting people on panels? Are they funding big initiatives or scholarships, for instance, inside the industry? Can be helpful to see what their trade community presence looks like.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and again, remember, this whole discussion is about, we're having coffee together. We're in transition, maybe 2 or 3 of us. And I just got this notice. There's a company that someone told me about, and I'm just looking for some advice. So think of not even as yourselves, but if you're looking at me, Rich, you came up with this potential interview. Here's some things you ought to think about, right? So don't think about yourself, because it's, for some reason, we're always also better at sharing information with others than we are ourselves. We don't like to eat our own cooking for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but we do like to give others advice. But anyways, I think John raised your hand, and then Janice.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Great conversation. I use a couple of other sites too, to piggyback on what Josh was saying. One is called craft.co, and I'll put these in the chat. Craft.co is a great site to learn about the executive suite and who's doing what. It goes right to who's in the C-suite and who's on the board of directors suite. And then there's another one that gets a little bit to the softer side and the social side and what people are saying outside of LinkedIn. It's called comparably.com. I found that both of those sites are very, very good for pre-interview prep.
Excellent. And then Janice, did you have something?
Sure. So you probably don't know, Rich, I'm the speaker next week talking about burnout, but what Liz said made me remember that a lot of companies are doing a lot for the community, direct to the community, like Target, Chevron, and they'll have a big section on their website to talk about how they're feeding children who need to go to school or supplying books. And so it's a good, I like to see what the companies are doing for the community.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. And I think it's important earlier on. Hopefully you've looked to see also what your priorities are. What are you looking for? So that may actually be part of your filtering. Is this a company that I want to be associated with? Or if I have a choice, is this something that I want to be with? So anyways, any other thoughts, things that people do? Reach out to your network to see, can you find an employee of the company? That's probably a basic one, but again, a good reminder. I think Josh's point of looking for people on social media, but then also maybe as I'm looking those individuals up, LinkedIn is such an awesome tool. Do I have a common, do I have a common link to those individuals? And then can I get an introduction to somebody, those folks? To have a discussion. Not only do I want to find out firsthand about the company, but maybe this person can end up being a reference or can introduce me to the hiring manager, right? There's nothing quite like getting an intro to a hiring manager. But anyways, was there anybody else that had a thought or comment on this? I think we hit a lot of points. The big thing is folks that I've seen over the years that have been the most successful have been the ones that have been the most prepared and walked in knowing the most. If you can ask a lot of really good, smart, probing questions during an interview, you are more likely to be asked for a second interview or maybe even get an offer. Also, you're more likely to understand what some of their issues may be, understand who the competition is, be able to highlight what things that you can do that will bring value added. Because again, this is a very high powered group, and you're looking to be in a position where you actually can impact and affect how successful the company is. So the more research you do, the better you're going to walk in. And and I'll go back to my time at WashU. That program was awesome, but it was very successful. And the success rate and people landing out of that group was incredibly high. So, and these are some of the things that they followed. That was part of that they do. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, we're doing all right for time.
Hey, Rich Town has her yellow hand.
Oh,
her yellow
I'm
wall, so it's hard to
sorry.
see
I
it.
missed it. I missed the page. And if I
Or
miss
my-
you, and if I miss you, don't be afraid to unmute and go, "Hey, Rich," right? Because who knows? I don't want to get shot while unseen. Anyways, go ahead.
Good morning, Rich. Yeah, I agree with what you were just saying, and I was just going to suggest that most of my research, regardless of the source, is going to be geared towards establishing either, common connections, understanding the needs and priorities of the organization, and kind of connecting those objectives or gaps that they may have to skills or experience that I can bring forward, value that I can bring, to light in my interview that will really kind of not only connect me to their objectives, but bring me into that zone where I can really speak, from experience and create that common connection with, the hiring manager or the person I'm interviewing with.
Great. No, that's a great comment. And then, I think probably the other thing is you can take some of this to also to individuals when you go through your networking process, right? We target jobs, but we also often target individuals. Who is it that I want to be introduced to in the community? And how can I maybe get a coffee date or a coffee comment, network event with Laura? Well, who knows Laura? Rich does. Well, what does Rich do? Well, let me talk and find out more about Rich. Let me find out more about Bill, or I want to get with Bill. And so the more people that I can chat with, the maybe have access and find places in common, the better my success is likely to be. And I have found the people that I want to talk to the most have been the most difficult. Why? Because they're busy, they're successful. And so it takes a very targeted approach to get time with them. And for the 2 years after I left my transition in the Air Force, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I was essentially doing a full-time program. I was a serial networker. I will be honest as hell about that. I spent all my time trying to see very influential people in the community, trying to figure out what I wanted to do and to talk with them and just get ideas that were out there. So I do think it works from a personal standpoint, but I also think it's great to do. Anybody else have any thoughts on their research on what I'll call the interview phase as they're going to go in? Okay, so let's say we do interview, we get offered a second opportunity, we come back, and then they're putting an offer on the table. So Laura, if you publish that, and we can, let's see how many folks we have. 1, 2, 3. Actually, we'll stick with this. I think, Laura, we'll stick with the group. We have enough interaction, I think. So there's a compensation form that I threw out, right? And this is a case where hopefully you've already sat down and it's a great document. There was one that was also my transition period. They had what they call Transition Assistance Program, and ETAP, which was for colonels and above leaving the military and the most senior NCO ranks. And really it was talking about this form that Laura sent you, and I adapted it recently, is about compensation. And the form really takes you through, and you know better that most of you know better than I do, what sort of compensation is out there. You may have what you recently had, what you desire, and then your offer, and then any comments, right? So what's negotiable, what's not negotiable? Maybe, my base salary, what range do I have? Do I want it all in incentives? Do I want promotion? Do I want a 401k? Actually, I had this discussion with my daughter. She is moving up in the sales chain, and she's now learning that it's just not all about salary, even though dad's been spouting that for a few years. But, I don't know if any of you have younger, children. Yeah, actually she's 30, so she's not younger, but they don't listen. They have to experience things, right? Because I said, maybe you would rather have a higher 401k match than salary. And then she's like, well, no, it's all about, and then now that she's paying her taxes this year, she's realized, oh, there's this thing called deferred compensation. There's ways to shelter my compensation. And oh, by the way, I'll use a 401k. That doesn't go against my match and is actually tax advantaged for the employer, right? Because they're not paying FICA on it. So there's reasons I may want to change my compensation structure. So this document's out there. I do think if you have a significant other, it's something you should both talk about. Is time off? What are your priorities? How much money do I really need? And when I look at this group and I think of where you're at, you probably are at a point that the top end dollar is not the most important thing, right? There might very well be a little bit of mission, as Janice said, of what they do in the local community. I may, as long as you meet my minimum salary needs and I have some other benefits that I'm looking for, I'd be happy. There's a reason a lot of these CEOs are taking $1, right? They're not really taking $1. They're just doing it in other compensation. What you hear about when you listen to the CEO of a company, oh yeah, I take $1 salary. I'm a great person. Well, yeah, you are, but at the same time, we all know the truth, right? So I'm going to throw this out, and I want to, actually, you know what? Let's just because I've not done this, let's break up into two groups. We're going to divide. Laura's going to divide us, so she's going to work on that as we're going. And then I'd like you guys to look at this and talk a little bit about, are there things that are missing? Are there considerations that you would have? And again, you are giving someone in your group advice. Pick that person or pick me. I could be the like, what would you tell Rich if he was coming in and said he had a job offer? What are the things that you would go through in these basic areas? And what would you maybe add? What's important? What lessons have you learned? And are there considerations, tax considerations, or are there, benefits to this? Or actually, forget it, Laura. We're not going to do it. Great. I'm changing my mind a third time. I'm going to be in touch with my male side and change my mind again. So with that in mind, so what do you guys have? What advice do you have for Rich as he says, I got an offer, or I know I'm going to get an offer. What do you think? What are some of the things and considerations that you would have that you would throw out, or would you add to this list to maybe think about? Anybody got one?
Rich, this is
Hey,
John.
Rich.
All right, go ahead, John. We'll go John, then it's Sienna.
Yeah, fairly comprehensive list. Thank you for doing this. This is very needed. The one thing I will say is know the state tax laws where you will be earning income because you will pay state tax to that state. And it could be different than your home tax, right? So if your employer is in Massachusetts and you're working in Massachusetts, it's different taxation rate than Tennessee, for example.
Right. So basically consideration is if you end up in a position where you're going to relocate, understand not only where your current tax laws are, but what the new ones would be as you go.
Right. And also, if you're traveling to that state and the dominant work through the entire year is in that state, that's where you'll pay a dominant part of your taxes. So
Right. No, that's good advice. So then, Sienna?
Yeah, I was just going to mention about relocation assistance, right? So depending on whether you're actually relocating and what kind of support for reimbursement that should be on the table. And as John mentioned, if you're actually doing a lot of travel, you may want to get into a little bit of detail with respect to your T&E budget for the position, for your own personal travel reimbursement, and kind of the expectations that you would have of, frequency and or just the types of reimbursements that you would need, and explore the travel, policy and whether or not you need some special accommodation or tweaks to that for your situation.
Okay. No, I think that those are really good. I mean, and again, figure out, is this something you're going to get and pay tax on it? Or can this become an expense for your company that you get a little less cash in pocket, but if it goes out the door anyway, it's not, it's at the end, it's about the net, right? Anybody else have any thoughts or inputs on this?
Rich, I think we need to look at cost of living if you are going to relocate. So we moved from Dayton, Ohio to Minneapolis, and I can tell you the housing here was probably 3 times more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So believe it or not. So this is kind of a, not your traditional Midwest, lower cost of living. Minnesota has much higher property taxes, and also housing itself is more expensive. So you need to factor that into your budget.
No, I think that's a great, what becomes it's almost a cost of living kicker from where I'm at now. Or I guess it might be if I'm in California and Silicon Valley or San Francisco and I get a job in a place in the Midwest that I really want to get to anyway, that I may be willing to take a lesser amount and buy some budgeted amount that allows me to live the same lifestyle, but in an area that I wanted to be at anyway. And, or it might be that because they're paying my relocation, even though it's not quite what I want, I'm happy because I was going to be here anyway. That was my longer term plan. What else do we have? Anybody have any other thoughts? I can't believe it's that thorough. There's got to be a lot of things that I'm missing, but
I would just jump in here about the, what does the employment agreement look like?
Mhm.
What are the, are you going to get into an overreaching non-compete or, NDAs are one thing where you're not disclosing what's confidential, but, blocking you from taking another role in the same industry and some of that language, I would just say be super careful about it. And while you don't want to plan for failure, the tenure in the C-suite is not long tenure.
Mhm.
And the piece to keep in mind about, so what kind of landing are they going to give you if you end up being sideways with new board members, or if the strategic direction of the business changes and a different skill set is important in your role? And so, taking a hard look at what is their severance language? What triggers it? Is outplacement more valuable to you than cash comp? Is there a clawback in a severance agreement where if you hustle and you're hired quickly, you don't get to double collect? Some of the elements there to take a hard look at, to look at your financial position, should this not work out the way you think it's going to.
Right. No, I think those are all great comments. And I think not only looking at the language though, but to also do the research, especially if it is strong language, of what the state laws are. Because often those agreements are written more to scare you than they are enforceable. So again, it depends on the state, but I've had many of my JD friends tell me, oh, don't worry about that wording because it's unenforceable in California. It's unenforceable in Missouri, or again, depending, you can't take direct customers, but if it's just general in the same industry. But very often employers, those contracts are written such that if nothing else, and they can be enforceable, don't get me wrong, but in some cases it's also written to hopefully dissuade you from going to the competition. So
Yeah, Rich, I think one of my experiences is certainly as you move up through this level, and once you have equity, if you're negotiating for equity as a part of your package, it is reasonable to expect some stronger terms around your non-competition language.
Right.
So even, just it's a consideration, and get good advice. Best piece of advice I got was get good legal advice on this.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I'm not trying to say that that's not a valid comment, because it is a valid comment. But sometimes like you say, the best thing to do is, if it's strong wording, make sure you get some legal advice on that, so you don't set yourself up for later. I think it's all good, but it's kind of important, right? Because I think also this topic is often, and I think, and I've seen this, I've seen the desperation, in that group that I was in. I've seen people close to tears because they're worried about their house and their kids in school. They've been in transition for 6 or 8 months, and they are just worried, right? And they're almost willing to jump at anything. And sometimes, things just, they happen, and it's the timing, all of a sudden when they were thinking about jumping, when it was not the right fit. And they got a lot of comments around the table that sort of hinted that. And then a week later, another job, which was the right fit, came up. And that's actually, fortunately, in that case, the job they took. But it's really easy. And it's easy for those who are not in that situation, or have enough capital, or having a working significant other who's not worried about the roof and the food, to go, don't worry about it. Yeah, you can wait. This is not the right fit, when they're not trying to put food on your table. And so it's a difficult place to be. But the more we can think about it in that unemotional, that feeling pressured moment, the better off we're going to be, I think. So I think it's very worthwhile to look at. And once you land, it's not too bad to fill this thing out and say, what do I have now? So that should that opportunity, as Liz says, either be forced upon you or become an opportunity becomes available, you can make a easier decision with less stress on yourself. What else does anyone have to add onto this list? Anything? Or is this, like I said, did we kind of cover everything? Well, going.
I guess I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's just a kind of a lag in the market, and I don't know if this is even appropriate to bring up, but just even talking about base salary, I've noticed companies are kind of acting like, in this time of COVID, you need us more than we need you. Yet when they pick you, they want to like really lowball you.
Right.
Which is a terrible strategy, because even if you take it, you're going to keep looking. But if it's kind of a really nice job and you want it, but they're really just playing the game, so to speak. I'm just curious thoughts of how people kind of, you can walk away, I get that. But I've just, has anybody else seen that same trend as well? Or is it just, yeah.
No, it's a great question. Often you do see when unemployment's high, sometimes organizations will decide that, hey, we can lowball people. The problem is, and I think, someone, or you talked about this before, like maybe you, to Janice's point, I'm looking for a company that wants to pay fairly for my value, right? And so I think it's a very short-term strategy that is likely to harm them in the long term as the economy picks up, because then a lot of those people that were undervalued are likely to find a place where they're more valued, right? And so I think let's go. But anyway, so Janice, you had a comment.
So I was in executive search for a long time, and I was just thinking about, when you're in the interview process, ask to speak to the people you'll be managing, your direct reports, because a lot of times they'll tell you things that the higher level C-suite won't tell you, like, what was the circumstances for the last person leaving? What is the situation in the team? How do you like working here? What's the corporate culture here? And you get a feel for what your life is going to be like based on the people you're going to be managing.
No, that's great advice. Has anybody else noticed anything on the market? Are they looking at low range from what they're expecting, or maybe we haven't gotten that point yet. But it wouldn't surprise me, Charlie, that that's the case. But I do think it's short-sighted. And it may also be, I don't know if it's industry specific or if it is, regional. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I might add, just like you said, though, it is in a way natural for some companies to go that route, but basically it's also natural for somebody in transition to take it because they need it and continue looking elsewhere. It's just natural, just the way things will roll out. It's just the way it is. If you really need it, you have to take it, but you continue looking. And whether they're aware of that or not is, maybe they're not, but that's just the way it is. You can't really change it. It's nature.
Right. Well, and then, it may, like you say, it may well be the way it is. The only problem that does come from those short things, if you start hopping too much, then the next employer goes, well, wait a minute, you're on your resume, it says you took a job with them 2 months ago. What's not working? And so it's damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situation. And I understand, like you say, especially if you're getting more desperate. Any other comments on that? And then if not, I'm going to go to my.
I have seen other applications that I have been filling, and thank you so much for your time today, that they ask for your salary expectations. And I tried not to put anything there. The application doesn't go through. If I put a low one, then it's not going to work. So I got an interview 2 weeks ago, and the recruiter told me this position is for this amount. Why did you put that lower amount? How am I going to take your application if you are half the salary, for example? And I told him that I was told by others that if we put a higher amount, then through the applicant tracking system, our application doesn't go through. So I'm not sure what we need to do.
Right. And maybe there's some people with some good advice on this.
Yes.
When you talk about listing salary, like now actually in California, they can't ask you what your previous salary was, right? It's against the state law. In some places they'll do it. I think, and there's another piece to, and I don't know how many of you are into negotiation, but there's everyone always, the adage is never be the first to take a number. The first person to put down a number loses. Well, there's actually a theory in negotiation called anchoring, right? So that the first number that's put out is the anchor, and then it varies from there. So if you are to give them a range that you've researched, it's fair for the value, and you offer that job and you say, hey, my number is 200K, and maybe they want to pay you 150. Well, now they're going to start thinking, well, we need to go higher in our range, where if you would have said 125, good luck in getting them to go higher, right? So by anchoring, you set the numbers. So there's theory on negotiation that you want to be the first to put out a number, but it has to be realistic. And the second one is, if you've done the worksheet, then you know what other levels of compensation you want, so that maybe you even work the number down a little bit, because you're willing to give up on that number because you're looking for other compensation. Again, that's part of that planning for your negotiation. But anyway, I thought I saw a hand in my, who had it, Joanne?
I was just going to add, though, that sometimes these application processes require that you enter a number. It has to be a number. You can't write something clever. And so, you are in a bit of a pickle. You've done your research, but, they're in fact forcing your hand to put a number down. And, I think that is a tricky thing. Occasionally, if it's a job I'm not super passionate about, I'll put $1 and just say, I defer that conversation till later. Or whatever, because, I don't want to be in that position where I've left money on the table for certain. But at the same time, if I put in a higher number as a starting point, that might take me out of the race, because perhaps that's just not on the table. versus, my kind of drop dead number. So I try to hit the middle, certainly doing my research about what the job is worth and that kind of thing. In Washington, they cannot ask for your prior salary. However, if you disclose it, they can check up on it. I don't know if California is similar. So, that is something to be aware of too. And to me, it's really, what does the job pay? And I know that that's the way HR is sort of headed. And it'll be an evolution someday, but today is not that day. And I think you do have to be fairly savvy in that. And
yeah, and definitely in the C-suite, there's going to be more negotiation, more of a range. But I will also tell you that for everything I've heard and seen, that for those of you on camera today, the answer is that is the final step, right? That's one of the final steps when the person says, hey, Joanne, I need you to put an application to HR so I can proceed, right? Because they've made a decision. You've been dealing with a hiring manager. You haven't gone through an application system, because typically that's where 80% of the jobs are. And that is more than likely where your next job is going to come from, not an application, but from dealing with a hiring manager who then happens said, now I need to make the HR paperwork right. So, and they might even.
But if you're talking to a Fortune 500 company, you're going to be in an application process. There's just no way around that, right? I mean,
well, you are eventually, right?
Yeah.
So I've known several Fortune 500 companies where, as someone was talking, finally the hiring manager says, I need you to go to our HR system and put in an application, right? To me, that is the ideal situation. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
10 to 15% of jobs do come from an app that are initiated from an application, but the vast majority of jobs are going to be from that network, that unseen job network. You happen to talk to John, and John knows Keith, and who knows Charlie's looking, and they introduce you. And then anyways, but you're right. You will need to do that at some point. And I don't know what the right strategy is on that. If they ask for a salary with the right number to put in, that I don't know. And I know it's constantly changing. I do know though, in a verbal negotiation, that you should know fair value and I would anchor high. But again, you might do your research a little bit from the company. But anyways, though. Anybody else have anything? I mean, it's a tough place. It's a good place to be, but it's probably in some ways almost as stressful as the job search. But it's a good stress, right? To be able to at least be in that negotiation. What are you going to get paid? So any other comments on that? All right. So then let's transition, and this could almost probably be another program. You got the offer, right? And you took the job, and now you're going to start. What is it that you were going to do the first 30 days, 60 days on the job? How do you walk in as the new person? And I don't know if it was Janice that said this of, hey, you want to interview the people you're going to work with that are going to be working for you. One of the other questions I'm going to ask is, was there an internal candidate? Right? Is there somebody that's in my team now that applied for the job and didn't get it? Are they going to become the passive resistor? Are they going to be the one behind the scenes that is sort of basically sabotaging me because, well, damn, we know that Laura was a much better choice. I can't believe she didn't get the job. And she and John and Josh and Charlie at their breaks or going out to lunch talking about what a poor manager I am and what such a great choice Laura would have been, right? So that's one of the first things I'm going to do is understand who the people are that I'm working with. I actually happen to do a few things, and a lot of this comes out of, for those who know, in the military, you spend a whole career doing job change, going from organization to organization, right? And you are the new person. So I have found that, remember that you're the outsider. You may have been hired, but you're the outsider. Be humble. Don't assume you know everything. Understand the why. There's a reason that people and process and resources are doing what they do. It may not be the best plan, but there's a reason for it. So that if you're going to change it, know why you're going to change it, and what is it what's going to be your culture change strategy. Again, what is the cost of that change? Recruit some partners, and then reward the things that go on. But with that being said, what else? How would you start? What is your walk in, Liz?
So to me, it seems like well before you show up for your first day, if this is a role, particularly if your job is tasked with a lot of change transformation, um, uh, and you're expected to lead change, I think one of the really big questions is understanding what did they do to socialize what this role will be responsible for inside of the company before you showed up. Like how much legwork or groundwork has already been performed, so that, and how did they do it, and what were the methods, and how many times, and how, did they get these conversations one-on-one with that individual who thought that they were entitled to the role. Because I think that's a really critical part of the process for you to know what you're coming into, and to actually create, together with the CEO or the other, the rest of the leadership team, what are the talking points around your start at this company and what your mandate is to perform. Because I think it's easy to come in with a clear expectation of, oh, well, they all know I'm supposed to grow this and that, but they may not be prepared that it's not always going to be comfortable to do that. And if other people are socializing that, hey, we're growing in this direction and it's going to stretch folks, and this is good, and we want this stretch because great companies know how to do this, and we want to be a great company, and Liz is going to come help us do it, that's a really constructive way to get started. If you just get thrown into the deep end and you're on your own to go be the the sign bearer for that message, it's a really different experience. And I think if you pre-plan how to be successful in it, you will have much better results.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. My guess, though, is that the majority of times people are thrown in the deep end, right? The majority of the times, and we've all worked as organizations, that we're going to have a change, we're going to have a new process. And even us as senior leaders, we don't always get the messaging down clear to those that are doing the work, right? That, hey, we had a meeting, we sat around, we talked about it, we made a decision, the board made a decision. They told folks, I can't tell you how many times I used to do what's called, I called it walkabout. At midnight, I would walk my organization and I would talk to my most junior, was airmen or employees when I was with the intelligence agency. And we had a big initiative going on that had culture change. Maybe we're doing digital transformation. And I'd ask them about it. And they would all, and more than times than not, guy would say, well, that's because you wanted it, sir. Well, no, there's this whole 3-hour messaging and thing that came out. Well, that never made it beyond the first tier of leadership, right? So I agree with you 100%. That's the way it should work. That would be best if it did, but I would not be surprised in the majority of cases that it was discussed with you, it was discussed at the CEO. Matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times in a COO forum that one of the one of the things that the COOs would like to see better of their CEOs was better messaging and support for the initiatives that they were given. That, often the CEO talks the talk, but he or she does not walk the walk. I mean, and we've all lived that. So I agree with you. So the question is how do I hopefully take that situation and make it better, continue to cultivate it, or if that's not the situation, as you say, I'm thrown in the deep end, how do I make that work? Anyways, so, and I think Josh, go ahead. So I think some of those things that you do are the same for both scenarios, but I'm hoping that I can get your scenario, Liz. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in a little bit, because one of the things when you walk in the door, obviously, through the interview process, you as a human being are selling yourself. The company's also doing that to you. So, I think early on, one of the main goals is to get some clarity around those like stealth barriers. What is in my way that they didn't tell me, that they wouldn't tell me? And I think one of the ways to do that, I'm a big management by walking around guy. So I want to talk to absolutely everybody all the time. And one of the things, like if I'm the new guy walking around, I'm walking around and I'm asking people, why do you think I'm here? Why do you think they brought me in? what do you think? Because that starts to point to, because chances are the answer is not going to be because you need to fix my process. It's going to be because those guys are a mess and we need somebody to fix that.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's going to be a lot. I mean, to me, those kind of questions will start to uncover some of that stealth stuff that's just under the surface that, are barriers to really you walking in and performing well. That the only way to uncover those is to go around and dig them out, right? But I mean, obviously, you have to be a little bit strategic with how you do that. So I think, going around having that kind of curious mentality of, hey, I'm excited to get started. Why do you think I'm here? Why did they bring me in? You think?
Right.
I think that starts to uncover some of that stuff, and you start to read between the lines of, hey, we've got some disconnect between these two departments. So there's a barrier I need to figure out. So I think having a little bit of strategy behind that makes a ton of sense.
No, I think it's a great way to do it. I think, in my world, we used to call it finding, right? Well, actually, I'll find it. In other words, the root cause, right? So we will spend the chain of events to figure out what is a root cause and what along the way can we fix. So I think it's a good strategy to do it. I usually say I'm an idiot to tell me what I need to know and help me out, right? And so, but it's that being humble. What can I do? And I think people will buy in. I think it's good. What else? What else is people think about?
Liz raises a really good point, though, about being, quasi-social scientists in the roles that we're talking about taking or assuming or looking for. And ProSci has some really, really good tools. If you haven't looked at them, I suggest looking at it. But there's two in particular that I like. One is called the Project Change Triangle, and the other one is just their ADKAR model. Project Change just takes and looks at the leadership, sponsorship, looks at the project management, looks at change management, and that's maybe the scientific side of it. But the ADKAR model is ability, desire, knowledge, awareness, and reinforcement, and it's really the people side. So if you take these two tools together, you're kind of getting to what Liz was talking about before and getting answers, but maybe using a little bit of a different approach.
Right. No, it's good. Awesome. Did anybody else have a comment? Some of you guys got to have some thoughts for me. I'm walking on my first day of this new job, and we all know Rich, he needs help, so help him. What else? What other advice would you give me for my first week on the job?
I would spend as much time as you can with your CEO or whatever your situation is, and try to learn their communication style, their preferences, depending on, I guess, the situation, wanting to know just their perspective on personalities and things that you can sort of squirrel away for later, because of course that's just one picture. But I think establishing a cadence for communication or just getting a good understanding of how much contact they want, everything, so that you are you're on the same page. Check in initially, or let them know you're going to check in initially a little more, but that if they're a hands-off person and they're going to let you fly, they are by all means happy to do that. But I just think it helps to, or if there's any missteps, just really, attacking those head on and saying, hey, this didn't go so well. I just want to check in with you so that we can prevent any kind of future whatever. And for me, that's gone a really, really long way in creating or cementing a relationship a lot faster. Just because there's so many things you don't know about the culture or different things that I think could be head off if you were really direct and open and clear, I think, from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good. Actually, I'll throw out a thing that I found was very helpful was trying to meet people in what I'll call a neutral territory. So, both of my last two positions, there was the break room. So even though I, instead of eating lunch in my office or doing something, I would go to the break room and sit down. And off the time, I wouldn't even talk. I would talk to people if they talked to me, but typically because you're in a position, no one wants to talk to you. So you feel like a social outcast, but you can sit there and eat your lunch and listen. And there's amazing the things that people would say at lunch when they're comfortable, even though you're sitting in the room, and what you, as Josh said, what you're learning. So I found, whether it's get that extra cup of coffee and hang out in the break room just a little extra time, especially when I'm new to the job, it allowed me to listen and take the pulse of an organization. So if you have that opportunity, you have a neutral location where people are comfortable and feel more social, I would take advantage of it. I think it's very awesome. Any last closing comments? Actually, this hour went by really quick for me. And I will say, if not, then I'm going to throw out, as a teaming event, you guys did awesome. I really appreciate it. Liz, Janet, all of you, Josh, all of you guys throwing out some advice. I really appreciate it. I think, there's some awesome points that were then. There's nothing that I think that we heard today that can't benefit someone, won't benefit someone in the future. So I really, really appreciate you guys joining us. All I did was sort of lead a journey. You guys did all the work. So I really appreciate that. I'm the knucklehead that needed the help, and I really appreciate all your support and help that you guys gave me today. And with that, Laura, I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes to any news or messages, but I really appreciate it. You guys deserve a hand of applause for your participation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Rich. It's nice to be led through that. And sometimes it helps a whole lot. And your expertise is very well appreciated. I appreciate you stepping in and taking this on today. And thanks everybody for your participation and contributions. I'm going to give 1 minute to Janice, because Janice is going to join us next week, and she'll give just a little bit about what she's going to talk about next week, and something you can think about as we get ready for it.
Thank you so much, Laura. Rich, that was a really fascinating conversation. The hour flew by, and as a former recruiter, and my mother was a recruiter, so going into interviewing, I knew a lot, but I learned a lot along the way, of course. So my topic is banish burnout, move from stress to success. As you all know from living it, transitions are one of the hardest stressors in the world, especially if you're going to be relocating and uprooting your family. So we'll talk about a few different things. One is self-care and preparing yourself mentally and emotionally for the whole process, for every meeting, taken from the interviewing process, and especially the negotiating process and the first day. All of that requires some mental self-care and alertness. And then we'll also talk about how to understand your particular stressors and how to change your reactions. For example, some people overreact to certain hot buttons. And so to start to recognize in yourself and your teams what some of those hot buttons are, so that you can manage your own stress and that of your team.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it next week, Janice, and with your background in the recruiting, it's going to be very, very good. That's it. That's all I have for today. This will be posted, a recording, share with anybody that wasn't here today that might want to see it. And feel free to invite anybody to the group as well. I know a lot of you already do, and we appreciate that. But have a great week, and thanks everybody. We'll see you in a week.